Welcome to Connecting the Community podcast. I am your host, Marge Andre. I will be connecting you to people, organizations, and events that create community. I am creating this podcast in Richmond Hill, an eclectic and very culturally diverse community with lots of trees and streams and interesting people, just up the hill from Toronto. On this podcast, I will be speaking with the founder of Miskwaadesi Studio, Sarah Schuster. When she introduces herself, she will share her Indigenous name with us. So, welcome, Sarah. Please introduce yourself and tell us some of your story.
Thank you, Miigwech, for having me and giving me this space to share. My name is Sarah Loretta Schuster, and in Anishinaabemowin, I am Zashkwa Gijigombi, which means blue sky water woman. I'm Anishinaabe from the Turtle Clan, and I have maternal ties to Laktamilak First Nation in northwestern Ontario. My biological mother, grandparents, and great-grandparents are from that community. I was adopted at 4 months old, and that's how I ended up in Richmond Hill. I'm also an intergenerational survivor of enfranchisement and the 60s scoop, and that legacy of cultural displacement has really led me to all the projects that I work on today. And some of those projects include being a local community organizer, hand drummer, craft artist, and caretaker of medicine gardens. I'm also in my third year of leading Indigenous craft and cultural programming at Richmond Hill Public Library.
Wow, that was a lot. So, thank you for that introduction and telling us all the great things that you do. So, you grew up in Richmond Hill, actually not
Mhm.
very far from where I live. So, we're sort of neighbors. But you also spent time downtown in Toronto and were involved with organizations and causes that I believe steered you in the direction of what you are doing now.
Yeah, so growing up in Richmond Hill in the 90s, I always felt really isolated in my indigeneity. I felt like I was the only person with a complicated adoption story, and I felt like there was this widespread unfamiliarity with Indigenous cultural traditions. It wasn't until I moved to Toronto in my early 20s for college that I found a sense of community, and I met so many people who were just like me. Many of those people were involved in initiatives that were trying to make the world a better place. And it's through working with these elders, knowledge keepers, mentors, and grassroots change makers that I learned how to be an effective community organizer.
Whoa. So I guess I'm glad you went downtown, but I'm glad you're back here in Richmond Hill. So, uh, can you tell us about what you were doing at Allen Gardens Food and Clothing Share?
Absolutely. Allen Gardens Food and Clothing Share was an Indigenous led community project, and it was co founded by one of my very close friends, Kathy Songdikwe Walker, who now leads Gawabaman Street Patrol. It was a response to the dwindling lack of social supports in Toronto's downtown east side. Each week, we provided a hot meal, clothing, toiletries, and harm reduction support. I was responsible for behind the scenes administration, managing social media, and preparing and serving food. And it was so much more than just giving out supplies. People really looked forward to the community space that we were creating each week.
Okay, whoa, that is interesting. I had no idea about that. Can you also share the story behind how Blue Wagon Outreach started?
Yeah, so as time went on at Allen Gardens, working directly with the community, I started to notice a greater need during bad weather and when shelters were at capacity. So I loaded up a blue pull wagon and I started taking supplies directly to where there was a need. I became really good at sourcing and organizing donations, and I also started noticing a real need for sacred Indigenous medicines. Many unhoused people don't have easy access to those medicines, so I started making small bundles from my garden to give away. And I also started making pain salves and bringing fresh tea.
Oh, that very, very nice. Can you share more about these sacred medicines and where do you grow them?
Yeah, so for Anishinaabe people and many other Indigenous people across Turtle Island, the sacred medicines are regional forms of tobacco, sweetgrass, sage, and cedar. I was really blessed to be adopted into a family that just loves gardening. We've been growing these medicines in our family backyard for many years. And whenever I lived in the city, I always had a balcony garden with the medicines and pots. I really believe that just having the medicines around you is incredibly healing. And something that's kind of cool is if you put a pot of sweetgrass outside your window, the breeze will bring that healing scent into your home.
Ooh, I like that. Okay. I have some sweetgrass, but it's way out in the back of my yard, so maybe I should bring some closer. I
Yeah,
like
put
that.
put some in a pot.
Yeah, very nice. Okay, can you talk about how there are different species of plants in a medicine garden depending on where you live?
Yeah, I think that the best example of this is the sage. A lot of people automatically think of California white sage when they think of smudging, but that's not actually a traditional medicine from this territory. Although historically it may have been brought up through trade routes, and Southern Ontario has a lot of microclimates where it might grow really well, but it wouldn't have had the widespread use that it has now. The overharvesting of California white sage has a real impact on the land and for the Indigenous people who live there and really rely on those medicines. The sage that I recommend to people isn't actually a sage at all. It's a wormwood, Artemisia ludwigana, or prairie sage, and it's one of the many locally growing plants that is used as a smudge medicine. It has beautiful silver leaves, and it burns quite similar to California white sage.
Okay, no, that very interesting, and I I have seen that plant, so yeah, that's we can it is accessible. That's good. Now, you are often invited to begin general public events in Richmond Hill with a smudge ceremony and traditional hand drum songs. I've seen you do that and very much enjoyed it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so for Anishinaabe people and other nations across Turtle Island, smudging is a way to pray and to connect with Creator. You can smudge to purify your mind, your body, your spirit, and also to open a space with good intentions. In this territory, we commonly use the sacred medicines to smudge with, but many other smudges and belief systems exist surrounding smudging, and that's okay. Creator made all of us. With hand drumming, traditional hand drumming songs are sung for many reasons, but typically when we sing to open a gathering or ceremony, we are praying. An opening song might be sung to welcome all the people, to acknowledge our ancestors, the land, the water, and all of creation. And these songs, along with a smudge ceremony, help start a gathering in a good way. It's always an honor to be invited to open a space and share some songs and medicine with the community.
Yeah, very good. Well, I am looking forward to having another opportunity when you are there doing that. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
So I know you have a love of crafting. I've had the pleasure of spending a few Saturday afternoons at the Central Library. I made a smudge feather and I think something else. Can you talk about these workshops? Like, where else do you do them other than the Richmond Hill Central Library? And I believe your website lists 6 different types of workshops. And I want to say, as well as offering instruction and encouragement, you're a great teacher. You do impart some Indigenous knowledge. I want you to talk about that and what do you hope participants take away from these craft sessions?
Yeah, so I have done talks and workshops mainly in Toronto and in York Region. I love sharing my lived experience and showing people the beauty of Indigenous arts and crafts. When I was growing up, dream catchers, medicine pouches, and beadwork, all of these things, all these beautiful crafts that I make would have been seen as like tacky tourist souvenirs. And when I teach a workshop and I share my story of how these crafts have been an important part of my reconnection journey, it's just so meaningful to me to see people walk away with a deeper appreciation and understanding.
Okay, definitely. Yeah. Now, can you tell us about the Miskwaadesi Studio and what would you like to see it become? What are your aspirations?
So, Miskwaadesi Studio is a continuation of a project that I started with the Odewan Foundation in 2022. I'm now leading this work independently with support from Richmond Hill Public Library and Canada Council for the Arts. Our workshops are designed to be an accessible space for Indigenous and non-Indigenous community members to learn together. There's a bit of hand drumming, storytelling, traditional crafting, and hopefully some medicine gardening in the near future. There are no costs to attend, and all materials are provided. And this space is so important because it helps fill a much needed gap, especially in Richmond Hill, which is an underserved community when it comes to accessing Indigenous cultural programming.
Yeah, no, definitely. I am very glad that you are doing this. So, uh, there are many published Indigenous books in many different types of genres. Do you have a favorite Indigenous author?
I can't name a favorite because I am always picking up a new book and discovering something new that really makes my heart come alive. One
Hmm.
of my favorite things to do when I'm in Toronto is visit BMV, a used bookstore on Edward Street, just north of the Eaton Centre. They have a small Indigenous book section, and you just never know what you're going to find. I'm currently reading a book that I picked up there called Damned, The Politics of Loss and Survival in Anishinaabe Territory by Brittany Luby. And
Mhm.
this book has really opened my eyes to how devastating the hydroelectric dams have been in communities in northwestern Ontario. My family's traditional territory has been affected by this, and it really ties into the bigger picture of how Indigenous people become displaced from their homelands and from their
Ooh.
food.
Hmm. That does sound like an interesting book. I wonder if the Central Library has it. And if not, you probably
Yeah, I'm
should
not
suggest
sure.
it. Yeah, okay, very good. I love talking about books, and I'm glad to hear that you love them too. Again, I've been really impressed with so many of the Indigenous authors. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Just a big chimigwech for this opportunity and for giving me the space to speak and share today.
Oh, no, you are very welcome. This has been a great conversation. Now, I do end all my podcasts asking the same question of all guests. I'd like you to name just one thing that you really like about this community.
Oh, I'm going to say the diversity of the community. Something really beautiful happens at Miskwaadesi Studio that I didn't plan. I thought that it would be people coming to learn from me, but it has also been people coming to learn from each other. And something really cool happens when everyone is sitting
Mm.
together at a craft table working together or working together in the garden. People start teaching each other techniques, stories about how they do similar craft work in their countries, and use similar medicines and share stories about how they have similar drums and songs. And to me, this is really powerful stuff. This is how we build bridges of understanding and build stronger neighborhoods.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely agree with that. I've been able to sit there and share stories, and it's really a very, very positive experience. So, I'm going to put your website and your way of contacting you, Instagram, Facebook people. They can keep in touch with you. They can follow you. I certainly encourage people to do that. So, and also the links to the library guide as well, because you've got a great relationship with the library, and we will. I encourage people to follow that, and then they can follow when you will be offering your next program. So thank you, Sarah, for taking the time to do this podcast. Thank you for listening. I would very much appreciate you sharing this podcast. Consider emailing me at Marge, M-A-R-J, at margeandre.com. I welcome suggestions for podcast guests. Stay well, stay connected.